Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, Technical Director here at Gardner Systems, welcoming you to part 2 of our on-demand version of Enabling Your Cloud Journey event. If you've missed out part 1, then don't forget to go back and check it out, as Grant Cayley shares with you some of his tips to ensure your successful journey to the cloud. In part 2, Jaap Duijvenbode joins us to talk about global file cache and how NetApp are using cloud technology to not only solve traditional data center problems, but also by giving you a possible way to bridge your data from your on-premises infrastructure into the public cloud. We hope you find this demonstration as useful as we did during the session. And if you have any questions, then please don't forget to contact the team here at Gardner Systems. We'll be happy to help.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul, and thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Jaap van Duijvenbode. I'm product manager at NetApp. Formerly, I was at a company called Talon, where we've helped organizations to simplify the way and enhance the way and streamline the way that they manage distributed storage. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about global file cache, which was a product that was recently acquired by NetApp, and how it stacks into the NetApp ecosystem on your journey towards the cloud. Like I said, for the last 10, 15 years, I've been working with a lot of organizations to look at their unstructured data and really facilitate for a better strategy to not only manage that data, but also at the same time be able to secure that and centralize that and consolidate that into a more robustified, scalable, and elastic environment. So basically, that's what I'm going to talk about today. That being said, what are the consolidation factors? So some of the reasons and some of the factors that are impacting the distributed enterprise is what we're seeing is a lot of organizations that are on-premise, hybrid, or looking at the journey towards the cloud, 80% of their data is typically unstructured file data. You know, your typical file servers at the edge, your typical file servers in your data center, your NAS devices, your Windows file shares, your SMB hosted data that you've been aggregating and growing over the last 20, 25 years. And we see an exponential growth of that data, but what we're also seeing is that only a small part of that data is actually active. And as Grant alluded to, sometimes we see up to 10% of the data being active, and only a fraction of that data is typically considered hot for the users to interface with on a daily basis. So some of these factors and some of the things that we're seeing in the enterprise, when they're looking at the cloud, they're looking at more intelligent ways to manage their data, not just lifting and shifting their file servers into the cloud as an IaaS workload, but really benefiting from the solutions that NetApp offers, that those major hyperscalers offers, to streamline and modernize that way that that storage is managed, backed up, secured, protected, and anything else. So global file cache is designed to fit into that strategy. But before we get into the demo and before we get into talk about some of these use cases, what are the reasons for organizations to modernize distributed storage? So for you, it may be relevant. You may have seen a historical picture where you have customers or you've worked in the organization and you have grown as a business. You may have anticipated mergers, acquisitions. You've grown as an organization in distributed fashion, whether those are regional offices, whether you have expanded in manufacturing sites, in design offices, or maybe global expansion as part of a business, now having to manage storage and infrastructure at all of these distributed locations. So some of the reasons to modernize distributed storage is, on one end, a lot of organizations, they haven't been able to look at their unstructured data set. They haven't been able to look at the edge, what we call it, the branch offices, the robo environments, and effectively organize that infrastructure. So what we're seeing is we see two things. On one side, we see the IT impact. As an organization grows, as data grows exponentially, we see that a lot of organizations today are still managing islands of data on on-premise infrastructure, on Windows file servers, and they have to facilitate for the excessive data growth and duplication of data. And most of these organizations, they're kind of sick and tired of moving that data or kind of around, replicating data, moving data into silos that are managed in an improper way. So as a result of that, for a lot of our IT organizations, it really becomes a complex exercise to manage this ever-growing infrastructure. And on the other end, if you look at the business, if I talk to the line of business users for many companies that I work with, they really struggle with the benefit that there's no single source of truth. So there's a productivity impact on the other side. So if you have a distributed environment, if you have many offices, it's very often to be found that organizations haven't been able to really centralize that data effectively whilst guaranteeing the performance at the edge in terms of application data, in terms of users data, home folders, and anything that you can think about. So as a result, the business impact is really drastic, because a lot of these organizations, they're not only siloed from a data management perspective, but they also siloed from a workflow perspective, and that needs to change. So global file cache is designed to kind of embrace that change and help organizations to consolidate their unstructured data into the cloud. And for many years, we've been working with customers in that sense to move parts of these workloads into cloud for the purpose of consolidated backup, maybe replication for DR, maybe specific technologies or specific workloads that are needed to be leveraged in the public cloud, such as VDI, such as high performance compute processing. But what we're seeing now, more than ever, is that organizations want to consolidate their distributed file servers. They want to get rid of managing Windows servers at the edge. They want to kind of streamline that infrastructure. They want to move that unstructured data into the cloud and leverage NetApp's intelligent data management solutions, and really, embrace the data strategy that Grant was talking about. Improve backup, improve DR, improve RTO, RPOs, and really benefit from a centralized repository of data that is not only scalable, but also is very cost effective from that perspective. On the other end, what we're seeing now, especially with COVID-19 and everyone working from home, we see a drastic need for organization to embrace VDI in the cloud more than ever before. Where VDI was typically like this 10-20% use case for a lot of organizations, I think most of us know that 70-80% of our workforce now works from home and requires stability in terms of applications that are offered to them through VDI, not only in the context of moving the mouse quickly enough and not being subject to latency from that perspective, but also in the concept of data mobility, the ability to not only have access to your applications, but also have access to data in the cloud, where the data may be sitting tens of thousands of miles away and your applications are pretty local to you. So a use case for global file cache is also to look at streamlining global VDI deployments, where you can actually regionalize data in your VDI farms to provide a better user experience. And then finally, what we're seeing with a lot of our customers that are in the architectural engineering space or manufacturing that deal with large complex files, they need to provide the ability to the business to better collaborate on their data sets. So global file cache is also designed not only to move that data into the cloud, sitting on NetApp's Cloud Volumes platforms, but it's also designed to subsequently cache active data sets out to the edge to provide the users that seamless experience and the ability to ensure their productivity, the ability to get their applications working in a transparent fashion, and the ability to collaborate globally, whether you're an organization with 2 offices, with different regions, or whether you're a global enterprise with hundreds of offices globally that need to work or share data in a real-time fashion.
I think it's interesting there, Jaap, is that is a real good example for me of where the use of cloud type technologies can really help, because I think all of those use cases that you've given there, and I've been doing this role over 20 years now, and in all of that time, this idea of how we share data across geographically spread organizations has always been a huge challenge. And actually, traditionally in our on-premises data centers, that's quite hard to do. We're relying very heavily on buying the same architecture everywhere, having multiple copies of our data, moving that data around. And companies like NetApp allow us to do that very efficiently. However, we are still moving copies of data around. We are still having problems around how do we control who's accessing the data in any location at any given time. And I talk about this concept, and certainly some of the people on the call have probably heard me use this phrase before, but I talk about this concept of tactical cloud use all the time. And that's the idea where we can use cloud to do things that we find very difficult to do traditionally in the data center. And I just find this a really interesting kind of use case for that. And is this something that you're still hugely seeing? Organizations are still having these problems on a massive scale? And is the problem actually just getting worse certainly when we're trying to solve them traditionally?
Yeah, Paul, so I think it's accelerating at the moment. Obviously we're we're going through this change of the way that we're working. And even though we're talking about remote offices and branch offices, we're actually talking about data availability, global data access, portability, the way to manage data better. I see a lot of customers, they're still throwing tier 1 storage to facilitate for their excessive growth. And if you consider that only 10% may be active, the cloud provides a great platform to have active data presented and archive data stored with the right cost associated with. So like Grant said as well in his overview, there's ways to use the cloud to facilitate for performance, where you have your performance tiers and you have a capacity tier that tiers data off into blob storage, so you can basically secure that for long-term data retention. So I think all these things come together, and they're relevant today, and they will be relevant for the future. Whether we're talking about managing file services, whether we're talking about managing in-cloud workloads, the ability to provide access to data is going to be more relevant than ever before.
Good question from the audience as well, Jaap. So from Richard, he asked, with global file cache, do you need NetApp technology at the branch offices in addition to the head office? And if so, what options are there for equipment required in each branch office?
Great. I'm going to get to that right now. So the short answer is...
Well done again, Richard. Segued nicely in. Well played.
We've been reading the script, I guess. But yeah. No, what I'm saying, global file cache is designed to leverage your existing infrastructure, your server infrastructure that you use at the edge. So it's a software product that overlays on Windows file server that is cloud platform agnostic. So if you have a strategy towards Azure, if you have a strategy towards GCP or AWS, global file cache will fit into that architecture. And because it runs on Windows Server, you could use commodity hardware at the edge and install our software package that enables the cache on top of that Windows Server to allow real-time access to your centralized data. So in short, you don't need NetApp hardware. You don't need enterprise storage in your branch offices. You can augment a Windows Server that's out there today. You can coexist with any roles or features that you're running at the edge for software distribution, for Active Directory, for DNS, DHCP, all of those traditional Microsoft services that a lot of organizations would still require from that perspective. So in a sense, what we're doing is we're leveraging Microsoft-centric technology and the latest NetApp technology in the cloud to facilitate for that transformative strategy to move your unstructured data into the cloud, use data migration options available in the marketplace today, and simplify the way that data is managed from a central perspective, and only use a cache at the edge to supply for that small fraction of data that is really hot. So what that results in is that you'll have a centralized and consolidated golden copy of your data into the cloud, and you're using caching of active data for optimal performance. And because it sits on Windows Server, and because it coexists with all those roles and features, it means that it's natively integrated with the SMB protocol. And as everyone knows, SMB protocol is not designed to operate on a wide area network. So how do you achieve the performance that you would typically require? So if you have multiple offices and you say, hey, I'm just going to move my data into the cloud, and I'm going to tell everyone it's going to be hanky-dory, a lot of your users will be looking at the flashlight in their Windows Explorer, and they have to wait for data to open up. Sometimes it takes minutes to open up a small Microsoft Word document. Factor in if you have customers with or users with AutoCAD applications or very complex large file sets, that becomes a real painful process. And therefore, what you need to do is you need to look at localizing the data as much as possible for that experience, for the performance, and at the same time, centralizing the data so you have a consistent experience and you can actually manage your data in a more intelligent fashion. And that's what global file cache is designed to do from that perspective. If you would look, before I get into the quote unquote recorded live demo, if you would look into global file cache and the way that that integrates within the NetApp ecosystem, on the right-hand side, we got our public clouds. We have our centralized storage platform. That's where you stand up your required storage platform of choice. So that could be Cloud Volumes ONTAP, which is data ONTAP in the cloud, and leveraging all these storage efficiencies and the benefits of ONTAP. CVS, Cloud Volume Service, or Azure NetApp Files, which are kind of PaaS solutions that you turn on as a file storage service. And Azure NetApp Files is a Microsoft first-party service. That's where you do your central data management. That's where you carve out your volumes, your capacity pools. You specify what your centralized data set in your repository looks like. And this could be one data center. This could be one region in the cloud, but this could also be multiple. So in that sense, on the right-hand side, that's where you integrate with all the required services. You deploy our software next to your central storage, and the software instance that you deploy first is what's called the core instance. And the core instance is a Windows Server VM that you enable in Azure, GCP, or AWS, and you just associate with your central storage platform, and in this case, and in the demo's case, with CVO. And by associating that core instance with CVO, it actually enumerates all the file shares that you have already provisioned. And it extends those centralized file shares out to the edge. And the edge could be a robo site, could be a branch office, could be a manufacturing site, could be a construction site, or it could even be a regional cloud where your users, have their VDI desktops. So in that sense, you're now creating a central single set of data, a global namespace, and present that out to the edge where the users are interfacing with that data. So the way that the global file cache works is basically the user interfaces with the edge at all times. So the user derives the performance from data caching, and we're eliminating the checkiness of the SMB protocol over the wide area network. And because it sits on Windows Server, we're inheriting all those benefits of the SMB protocol, the NTFS file system, metadata, extended attributes, permissions, all these good things that you would typically require in a Windows Server environment. So in a way, you can now look at this architecture, this overview, as a global file sharing platform that allows you to provide performance accessing that data to all your users on a global scale whilst managing the data and therefore improving RTO and RPO. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to walk you through a quick video that talks about enablement of a single set of data in AWS. And in this case, I chose to leverage Cloud Volumes ONTAP because Cloud Volumes ONTAP is a platform that's available, that's a mature platform. And a lot of organizations and customers that I've worked with, they've enabled Cloud Volumes ONTAP to move their unstructured data, either primary workloads or secondary workloads into. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a file share on top of CVO. And obviously, I'm going to carve out a 5 gig volume, and I'm going to create a CIFS or an SMB file share. Subsequently, what I'm going to do is basically, as a result of all this, I'm creating an intelligent storage platform in the cloud that can facilitate for a standalone setup, can facilitate for HA, can also span across multiple regions and use SnapMirror technology to move data between regions for in-cloud or multi-cloud type of use cases. But in essence, what I'm doing is I'm creating a file server or file storage platform in the cloud. So now that I have my CVO infrastructure stood up literally in minutes, I'm going to mount to the actual central storage platform to just put some files in. And this is just a demo exercise where I'm going to drag and drop some documents into a centralized file share. But if you have large amounts of file services or file servers at the edge, you may want to consider using NetApp's technologies such as Cloud Sync to effectively synchronize or migrate your unstructured data workloads into the cloud in a more effective manner. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I've provisioned a Windows Server VM in the cloud, and I'm going to mount to this central file share that I just provisioned. And I'm going to create a test folder here, and I'm going to drag and drop some of the test files that I'm going to use into this central file share. Now, everyone is familiar with this. So this is a transparent experience, the way that users interface with their data, especially unstructured data. Everyone is known or is used to their yellow folders. They're used to Windows Explorer. They're used to all the Microsoft fundamentals of being able to access their data and things like file locking and data integrity from that perspective. So now that I've stood up some data in my CVO file share, I'm going to actually deploy my core instance. And remember, the core instance is the VM that sits next to your central storage platform. And the core instance is merely considered a traffic comp, meaning that we're only going to mount to your central SMB file shares. So this is not NFS. We're not talking about NFS here. We're talking about SMB. And the way that we associate with that SMB endpoint is by just configuring this piece of software that we just deployed, which is still branded as Talon here, but it's now called Global File Cache. and we're going to associate it with our backend. And as you can see in the configured backend servers list at the bottom, we got AWS. And AWS is basically our CVO instance that we've associated with. So now that we have our core deployed, what do we need to do? We need to actually deploy the same software package at the edge in a remote site. And that site could sit hundreds or thousands of miles away from here, and it could have hundreds or even thousands of milliseconds worth of latency between the edge and the core. And what we've done here is we deployed the software on top of this VM at the edge. It sits on VMware, Hyper-V, or sometimes even on bare metal. And we associated this edge instance with the core that I'm running in AWS. And as you can see at the bottom, you'll see the Fast Fabric ID, which is the association of the edge to the core. So now that I have an edge deployed, it's communicating with the core instance, and the core instance is communicating with Cloud Volumes ONTAP. As a user, I'm able to access that centralized data in real time. So now that I'm a user, I'm logging onto my workstation, I'm getting to my drive mapping, or I'm using a domain-based or standalone DFS namespace, I would actually connect to what's called a virtual file share. And the virtual file share in GFC represents a namespace that corresponds to what you're standing up centrally. So if you have multiple CVO instances, or you have Azure NetApp files and CVO next to each other in Azure, you can aggregate those endpoints into a single namespace for users. And as you can see here, what shows up is a data share that we just created. And I can see a test data folder. And as you can see here, it represents a little cross mark. The folder, the icons, and the files and everything represents a little cross mark, which is presented by the Microsoft offline attribute. That means that the metadata of the file is cached on the local edge cache, but the actual file contents are not available yet. We have to fetch that from our central authoritative data set. So now that I'm opening my Word document, what happens? The edge communicates with the core. The core basically will take a file lockout on the central file that's sitting on CVO. It streams, compresses, and optimizes the data over the wide area network. So even if you have low bandwidth, that's already accelerated. And your cache will be populated with the active file. So now your user is working on the file, making some changes, and I'm going to save this document. And what will happen? The document will be saved locally to the edge, and the edge will communicate with the core to only send out over the deltas, the data, the incremental data, delta changes that happen on that specific file. And as you can see, this file now has quote unquote warmed up, which means that the file is not only resident in the edge, but also the file changes are immediately synced in real time to our backend file server, which is the Cloud Volumes ONTAP platform. And I think right here is where you can observe the timestamp and the changes of the file have been committed from that perspective. So this is a technology that is not only built to achieve consistent data access and to achieve a single set of data for your environment, but also facilitates for the use case of file collaboration, where if I'm working on a document in one office and someone else from another office tries to open up the same file, he gets a message that the file is in use. Do you want to get a read-only copy? Do you want to get a notification? It all looks and feels like your traditional file server environment, but now on a global scale, which provides a lot of benefits because you can centrally manage your storage. You can replace, consolidate your Windows servers or your file servers at the edge and replace it with a small cache to reduce cost and complexity at those locations as well. And from a performance perspective, what we're often seeing is if you are on your journey towards the cloud and you think, hey, I'm just going to move my unstructured data into the cloud and I'm going to hope for the best presenting that data to my users. A lot of customers that I spoke to over the years that have tried that, they were unsuccessful in terms of ensuring their end user community's happiness factor, so to say. So what we've seen is that if you move your data into the cloud and you do nothing, your performance, especially with regards to the SMB SIPs protocol, is going to be degraded. Even if you're 10, 20 milliseconds away from a data center, what we're seeing in red is the performance that your users will get opening some Word documents, Excel files, CAD drawings. It's 60, 70 seconds to open up a small file is very common. With global file cache, you're not only allowing that initial file transfer to happen in a more swift manner, the caching component that plays a big instrumental part in caching active data, either on demand or through pre-population of that data set, really gives back that performance to the users. So the users really have the look and feel of a local file server, but with the centralized footprint in place, with a central source of truth that is always consistent. So you're eliminating data corruption, data loss, and all those things altogether. That being said, I want to wrap this up. Obviously, Paul and myself, we've worked over the last couple of years, even in the Talon days. We had discussions around how does global file cache, integrate within a strategy for customers. I think with the recent acquisition by NetApp, we now have an end-to-end solution approach to provide for an end-to-end data fabric that allows you to intelligently manage your storage centrally, as well as guaranteeing performance and integration of application and user data at the edge as well. So really happy that our partnership has evolved, and I'm looking forward to working with the team at Gardner to continue work with the customers to go through this exercise. My final statement here is obviously the way that global file cache is brought to market is if you are a Cloud Volumes ONTAP customer and you have an HA instance deployed in your environment, the first 10 site licenses are a free of charge item. So global file cache is available to you today and is available for you to kind of benefit from with regards to the ability to centralize and consolidate your data into the cloud. And with that said, I want to open it up for questions.
That's great, Jaap. Appreciate that. So we have one question again from Richard. So he's found the chat window, which is good. Is there any specific? Sorry, try that again, shall I? Is there any specific required setup for home workers connecting via SSL VPN? Do they connect direct to the cloud core storage, or I suppose would they hit kind of like a local cache?
So basically, what we would recommend, because this software runs on Windows Server, it's not very obvious that users are running Windows servers in their home offices, but what GFC allows is to deploy an edge instance in the cloud. So you have two options there, Paul. So you can actually, or Richard, you can actually have the user's VPN directly into the backend, into the cloud, to access their data directly from Cloud Volumes ONTAP, or you could have your users VDI into a regional VDI farm that happens to have a global file cache edge, where you localize the data next to your VDI farm that supplies for your application experience.
Okay, so yeah, it's great. Thank you, Jaap. I hope you found that useful. I think Jaap's demo is a great example of how NetApp are using public cloud to not only solve traditional data center problems, but provide a simple bridge for you to take your data from your traditional data center environment and move it up into the public cloud. If you do have any questions, then please contact the team here at Gardner Systems. We'll be pleased to help. We hope you've enjoyed our on-demand replay of our Enabling Your Cloud Journey event, and we hope you'll be able to join us at future events sometime soon. So from all the team here at Gardner Systems, thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.